All right, so in this video tutorial lab, what we're going to do basically is just light the animation that we made in the previous lab. This should be actually relatively easy. This is probably one of the easiest things that we do. Before I do that, we want to base our lighting off of our cameras, right? Because our cameras are that's what we're gonna shoot our footage from. So we're gonna make those first. They can be made a couple different ways, but we'll just make them this way. So we'll just go to create cameras, and then you'll see there's camera, and aim, and up. And basically you can have a locator, like let's say this is the camera and I have a locator, and I can put that on an object, and then wherever I move the camera, no matter what, it will always stare at that object. So that's what they're talking about with the aim. It puts an aim constraint. And then up just means you also have another one that goes up, so it keeps the camera also pointing up. Because if you don't do that, what will happen is it could potentially roll on you, which you probably don't want to happen, more than likely anyway. So we're not going to do either one of those because we're not doing any camera movements, so I'm not really that concerned about it. So we're just going to do create camera, and where is my camera? Well, we'll hit W. It's probably right there. Okay. Oh, you know why? Because I'm going to go to show, and let's turn cameras on. Cameras. That's why I couldn't see it. Okay. So I'm going to bring this over here, and we're going to pull this over here. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to tap spacebar to get my four planes here. This is my working camera perspective. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this camera over here. So we can do it a couple different ways. I can go panels, perspective, and you'll see our new camera. You can also create a camera that way too. You can hit new. Or if we already have it selected, and you can do this with any object, you just go look through selected. And now I'm looking through the camera. And now when I move and rotate and what have you, you'll actually see it changing over there. So I'm picturing this shot will do something like this. Okay. This looks acceptable. I want to change a couple of settings before I know exactly what I'm shooting here. So one thing is, if I hit 6, do I get my textures? And I do. Okay, good. So that means the project's set. Just make sure the project's set correctly, otherwise it won't work correctly. Okay, so that's fine. I'm going to go to show, none, show polygons. Where are you polygons? Boop. Because that's all I really want to see in here, because I don't need the controllers, I don't need any other stuff. This is just for viewing purposes. That's good. So what I want to do is be able to see what I'm actually rendering, because this resolution here, right, this aspect ratio can change. Like I can make it wider and skinnier, and so you don't actually know when it goes to take this and make it into 2D images. You don't actually know what size it's going to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to, before we even bother doing anything else, I'm going to go over here to the render settings, which is this button right here. And we're going to, we'll need to change a bunch of this later, but I just want to go down here where it says image size. And we're going to change this to 720p, because 540 HD is not, it's like 960 by 540. That is not HD resolution. So we're going to do 720, which isn't really either. Usually you want to do 1920 by 1080, but the larger the image, the longer it's going to take the computer to render it. So I think 720 is kind of a good middle ground. So we'll say okay on that. And I'm going to hit this button here. This is the resolution gate. Now you see how it says 1280 by 720? It's getting that from the settings. If you don't change that, it's going to say 960 by 540. And you can just change it up here. Luckily enough, those are both 16:9, meaning it's the same aspect ratio. So it's 1920 by 1080. And then I don't know what 4K resolution is by default, but whatever that is. Anyway, so this lets me know this is what it's actually going to render. Okay. So that I care about. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look and see, what I'm going to have here. Now, generally speaking, what you want to do is most of the time when you do your shots, right, you're trying to highlight a specific thing. So I'm not going to get to what kind of shots to do and why you do them and all that, because if you really want to learn about that, the film class, video production, they cover that really in depth because it's a really big part of theirs. And just for time purposes, I'm not going to get too nailed down on that. But most of the time, you want to basically be as close to the subject as you can be, because the closer you are, the more intimate you are, and the more the audience will be involved. Except for one time, and that is an establishing shot. An establishing shot basically it's usually the first shot of whenever you have a new setting, and it's a really far shot. And that's kind of what I want to do here. And it's just meant to show you like what location you're currently in. So I'm going to back this thing up And let's turn off this. I'm just going to go like this. So that way we get an idea of what we're walking into here. So, okay, he's walking in. And now you know, he's walking to a computer, right? Okay, so that's good. So this shot needs to go from here and then right here. This is the last one. So 48 is the last frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this camera. You can select whatever camera by clicking on this camera button right there. And then it'll say camera 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this shot 01 underscore 1 underscore 48. And what that does is that it says shot 1, so that way I know what shot it is. And then it says from frame 1 to 48. It's just a way of me knowing through naming convention of what this camera is representing, okay? Now, sometimes you'll see things where they'll do like SC05, SH0 whatever. That's because they're saying scene and shot. Different people have different ways of doing it. Some people don't do this at all, but I just like it because that way, if we're doing this layout and stuff and we send this off to somebody else, they can tell by looking at the cameras which ones they're supposed to render out of and which camera is what camera for which shot and what frames to render. It's just a good idea. Okay, so I'm going to call that good. I think that's pretty good. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to lock this camera. Luckily enough, you just have to lock it over here. They actually have a button right here. You click on that and it locks it. And now if I alt or right or middle or whatever, it will not rotate. So now that camera is locked in. So we're going to call that good on that camera. All right, let's go ahead and let's pull this up a little bit and let's make another camera. So we'll do it the other way down here. I'm going to go to panels, perspective, new. And let's turn this off. I'm going to hit 6 over here so I can see all my business. And let's do show none, show polygons. Okay. And let's also put the resolution gate on. And I'm going to tap spacebar so I can see just this shot. Now, we're going to put it right here. So there's a thing called the 180 rule. And basically the idea is that if you have two people, in this case, we don't have two people. We have him and we have this. But the idea is that the camera will never go past an invisible line between the two subjects. Because if you do, suddenly where he is on the left here, if I suddenly put the camera over here, he's now going to be on the right. And that's very jarring to go from one shot being on the left and the other one being on the right. You will see this used, however, and next time you watch a movie, if there's a scene where somebody's lost or they're looking for like a bad guy or it's jarring and it's supposed to be confusing, you'll see they'll switch. They'll actually break the 180 rule, and that's on purpose because it's disorienting, and that way you feel what the character feels. So in our case, we want to make sure we keep him on the left side. So I'm just going to cut a little bit closer. And we will do something like this. Let's go over to where the actual guy is. Okay. So we'll go, we'll say, see, it depends on where I want to do exactly. Because I could do over the shoulder, but it's not as intimate. I'd rather be able to see his face so we know it's Mark Zuckerberg. He wouldn't wear a cool Spider-Man shirt though. Okay, so we'll call that good. So you can, I'm trying to. Generally speaking, you usually want to be eye level with the characters, so that's good enough. Okay, so I'm gonna call that good, and you want to play through to make sure that everything is visible in your shot, that you're getting everything that you need. So just make sure you scrub through, and I would say that's good. So I'm gonna go ahead and lock this with the little lock button. I'm gonna select the camera by clicking on this, and now we have it. And I'm just gonna call this S8 shot 02. Underscore. This is going to go from frame. The other one went to 48. This one starts at 50. So, and it goes to, I should have done this first. Shot 50, and it ends at, we'll give a little bit extra. So we'll say 105. So 50 to 105. Okay. So let's shot 02 underscore 50 underscore 105. Okay, and now I know what that one is. All right, so I have those two cameras. I'm going to tap spacebar. And now we have our general 2 shots here that we need. And then we have this other one here. And this is just extra. Okay, so let's set up our lighting. So we've got our camera set up. It's probably a good time to save it. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this as the next version. And we'll save it as delete 4. Okay. And I need to make the lighting. So we can do lighting in a couple different ways. Usually what I like to personally do is I will put the practical lights in, and then I will put in the lighting. And so when we say practical lights basically mean it's the lights that actually exist in the scene. Okay, so like right now, I have a couple of practical lights that you can see on me. So I have this light here that's coming from the window. Okay, I have a light that's coming up from there, and you can see this one's blue, and then this one's yellow, and then there's generally lighting coming from up there. However, those are the lights that are in here, and they probably are generally lighting me. But most of what you see is actually light that's bouncing off of everything else. The whole environment's lighting you. So usually I put in the practical ones, the ones that you can see in the scene, but they won't be bright enough and you won't have much artistic influence over it. Then you'll put some more supporting lights. So for here, we're just going to make one for his screen here. And then I'm just going to put one because I don't really feel like doing it. And then maybe we'll put one above, and then we'll put a bunch of supporting lights. All right, so let's go ahead and just put the screen one in first. So I'm going to go to Create Lights. And we have a bunch of different options here. I cover it in the website, but basically ambient light lights everything uniformly. It is semi-directional. You pretty much never want to use that though, because it gives you a very flat look. It's not very good. Directional lights light from one direction, from infinity to forever infinity in a direction. Think of it like wind. Okay, it's just whatever. It doesn't matter where you place the light. It just matters how you angle it. Okay. Point light is what it sounds like. It has a point, and then the light emanates in all directions out of it. Okay, so think of like, you know, a fire or a lighter or a light bulb, right? It just emanates entirely out of it. Spotlight is exactly what it sounds like. Think Batman or headlights, where it's a light that shoots out. Area light is a light that's basically a flat shape. Usually, by default, it's a rectilinear shape. And then volume light is kind of like point light, but it has a three-dimensional volume that you can scale. So for this, we're going to just use area light. So create area light. I'm going to take this and over here, I'm just going to go ahead and do show all. I'm going to take this area light and I want to bring it over here. And we'll rotate it around and this way. So you can see with the area light, pull this out a little bit. You see how it has this little line that, let me hit you, has a line that comes out. That's how you know what direction it's shooting out of. But basically, it's this shape here. So we're just going to, we're going to rotate this. So it's, hopefully, we'll just do -90. Okay, let's try that again. -90. Good. And then we're going to, let's do panels perspective, or sorry, orthographic. Let's do top so I can see a little bit better. I'm at per frame, and I'm just going to scale this W. I'm going to try and put it as close to there. Okay. And we'll go up. And you can see, right, it's too tall, so I'm going to have to scale it this direction now. And we'll put it down a little bit, and we'll call that okay. Now, it doesn't need to be perfect. Make sure you don't go inside of it, because then it's going to light the inside of it. It has to be just outside of it, all right? But we're never going to see it in our lighting. I mean, I guess you will see it here, but it's so far away you won't notice. So we're going to take this. I'm going to go to the attribute editor, and we'll make the color blue. We'll have it kind of, you know, because usually you think of blue. And we'll take the intensity. Let's try doing like 2, because I want it pretty bright. And then we'll go to shadows. And these are the kind of shadows we can create. And just make sure it uses ray trace shadows. And I just want to take the shadow rays up to 3, and we'll take the depth to 5, which is going to make it take longer to render. We'll leave it at 3. The reason why is that if you keep that a little low, it's really crummy looking. Okay, these are kind of expensive lights computationally. All right, so I'm going to call it good for now. We're probably going to have to adjust that one. Now, the other lights that are practical would basically be, oh, you know what? You can see the other monitor here. So we're going to take this guy and we're going to just duplicate it, Control D or Command D if you're on a Mac, and we'll rotate it this way. And let me look at it from the top view. And we'll scale it down. W, and we'll move it here. Okay. Move it down. And fortunately, I never modeled this, but okay, so we'll call that our practical lights. Now, the next light, I guess, would be kind of the light coming down. So let's go ahead and go to Create Lights, and we're going to do, so, you know, most lights from the ceiling are going to be basically a spotlight. So we're going to do a spotlight. You can see it here. I'm just going to pull this up. Now, this can be hard to tell where it's hitting. If you do plus and minus, it changes the size of the manipulator. Let me make this bigger. It can be kind of difficult to point, like, where is this pointing? It's hard to tell. So what I like to do is this. I will do that trick I did to look through the camera. With this selected, I'm going to go panels, look through selected. And now I am actually looking through the light. And you see this here? This is the cone angle. So this is actually where the light is shooting out. So I'm going to back this up a little bit like this. And I know it doesn't actually exist. Like if you look, you see it's way too high. But it's better to do that than not. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that. And I'm going to change my cone angle wider. So it covers the entirety of the room. And we'll do drop off just a little bit, which is a little bit less than that. Like that. We'll say like that. Let's do 1 for drop off. That's better. Okay. Good. And then this is an interior light. So generally interior lights have a slight yellowish tone. So I'll put a little bit of a creamy yellow in there. And we'll do 1.25 for the brightness. And we'll call that good. Okay. So, and I'm also going to actually, which I know doesn't make a lot of, no, we'll go this way. I'm just going to go slightly tilted towards him in a kind of downward but towards him direction. Now let's click on this guy, and I'm just going to see what this looks like. It might look terrible right now, so I'm going to click on right in this gray area. See how this is? See how there's a little light gray line? Watch the light gray line. So I'm going to click on this one, and then I'm going to go ahead and go to the render settings again, and I want to switch this from Arnold to Maya Software. Okay, but it'll probably be Arnold by default, so switch it to Maya Software. Now go ahead and hit render. And it should render out our scene. Woo! Okay, so you're going to see that there's no real shadows yet. And that's because I forgot to turn them on my spotlight. So I'm going to go down to shadows. And we want to do... Oh, it does have ray trace. Oh, I know why. So we're going to put... the shadows are on here, but they're not on the render settings. So we're going to click on the render settings here. We have Maya Software. Go to Maya Software. I'm going to change the quality to production. And then down here where it says ray tracing quality, that's what's making our shadows. We're going to click on that, and then we're going to close. And then we're going to try, make sure we're on this guy again, and then hit render. And now it might show up black because, and I'll show you in a second why. It should be an easy fix, but it's going to take quite a bit longer now because ray tracing takes a longer time. If you're really into video games, you'll notice like the big thing now that they've been showing like in like the newest game engines is that they support ray tracing. Ray tracing basically allows reflections and real shadows. So yeah, see how it's only blue? That's because the only light that's hitting our character, which is kind of cool looking, but the only light that's hitting our character right now is the light emanating from those screens. Okay. Now the reason why that is because if you look at this, this is outside the box. See? Right? See the scene here? So it's not going through. So what we can do is do a little bit of a cheat. So I'm going to go to my channel box. I'm going to unlock my rooms from reference. I can select them. I'm going to go to the attribute editor, go to the shape node, go to the render stats. Remember how we did that thing when we turn off double-sided? There's another one here for cast shadows. So we're going to make it so this box doesn't cast shadows, which will allow our light to shoot through it. So it doesn't cast a shadow instead of lighting it. And then I'm going to go back to channel box, and we're going to go back to locking that to reference. Make sure I click back on this guy, and let's hit render again. And it should be considerably better now because now the light should be able to penetrate through the ceiling. And there you go. Look at that. Okay, so depending on the speed of your computer and what have you, this could take longer or shorter. Generally, the first render of a rendered sequence, or the first frame of a rendered sequence takes much longer. So these will take probably longer than your actual frames will. It took about 36 seconds. Typically in a production, like if you're a student film should take your frames when you're done, should be around 2 minutes a frame. If you're in a small studio, you usually want to go up to about 10 to maybe 20 minutes. And then if you're like Pixar or something, it's like 2 days. So, but that's kind of what the goals are, I would say. Okay, so we have our basic lighting there. That sort of works, and in some ways that is more realistic. But if you look, you see how we have like these really dark areas that are just way too dark, and it's a little flat. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna add some supporting lights. Okay, so to do that, it's gonna go to create lights, and we're gonna do all supporting lights. And basically these are bounce lights and they're fill lights. So our key light, our main light, if you're using photography, right, which is the light that's your main light source, it's meant to light your figure, is your key light. Then you usually have everything in shadow that's not being lit by it. You use another light, or you use a bounce, like an object that reflects the light onto the dark area, and that's called a fill light. It fills in all the black, so it's not entirely dark. And then sometimes we'll also do like rim lights or ring lights or whatever, and basically to let you point at the back, so that if anything is in shadow, you have like a highlight, like a rim of white behind them. I'm not going to worry about doing that. Instead, what we're going to do is just do lights, and we're going to do directional lights. And basically, these are meant to be like my bounce lights. Now, again, these actually don't matter where they are. I usually just put them where I can easily see them. So I'm just going to pull it up, and I'm going to scale it too. Scale really doesn't change anything about it. And what I want to do is I need to fill in the areas that are dark from this light here, this guy, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this, and I'm going to rotate it in an upwards and opposite angle. We'll say like that. And I'm going to go to my attribute editor here so I can change the settings. And I'm going to go ahead and make this kind of a similar brown color. We'll go like this, because I'm picturing this is the light reflecting off of that. So we're going to go with that. And then the intensity is actually not going to be very strong. Let's do 0.4. And then the other thing I don't want to do is I do not want to emit specular. Specular is the highlights. I do want my key light to have it because I want it to have a shine from the key light, but I don't want my reflective lights to create shines. Otherwise, you'll end up with a bunch of specular highlights, and you end up with a lot of hot spots, and it doesn't look very good. Also, on shadows, I want to turn shadows off. I don't want this to create any shadows. Just the key light creates shadows. The key light's meant to create the shadows, and it's meant to create the highlights. This one is just meant to be a fill light. Okay, so we'll create one first. So we'll call that one. Okay, that's kind of my main reflective bouncing off light. Let's just go ahead and see what that looks like. Let's actually click on this one, because we're probably going to need one for the other direction as well. And I'm going to pause it while it's rendering. I rendered the front, and I also rendered the back. So the back doesn't look too bad, but you can see it's still pretty dark right there because I made a light coming up. So all that's really going to do is fill in some of these areas here, as well as this blue is also doing it. So between those two, you can see how this is like it's not pure blue here. That's because we have that other brown light, or that reddish brown light coming up. That's meant to represent this. So I need to do some more fills as well. So this one needs a little bit, and then this needs a little bit too. So I still need to get something I need something to shine down on that. That's going to kind of counteract just this blackness. So close that out. And I'm just going to take this light we already have, just duplicate, Control D, W. I'm going to move it over. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have it go this direction. Actually, you know what? The light's coming in that direction, so we're going to go this way. So, because see how the light's kind of coming down in that way? So I'm going to have this one kind of coming down in this way, like so. And I'm going to have this represent more or less kind of ambient light, like maybe light that's from outside. So we're going to make this sort of a bluish, greenish kind of cyan color. And let's try 0.4 and see what that looks like. So I'm going to hit render, and then I will pause it again, and then when it's done, I'll show you what that looks like. So here you can see, right, by having that blue light, you see how this has a slight bluish tint to it, which is good because it helps the shadows recede and what have you. So generally speaking, I would say this shot's pretty good. I'm happy enough with this that's kind of completing the shadows. There's definitely a little bit of darkness right here, but I can live with that to some extent. But what I'm going to do is switch over, let's close this out, switch over to this shot. And I'm just going to render this out, see what this looks like, and then using that as a guide, we'll see what we want to do. I'm feeling what we're going to do is need to put in a fill light, just because I think there were some dark areas that could probably use a little bit of help. But the other one might have fixed that. I don't know. I'm looking at this, excuse me, and it's not terrible. But I think it probably could use a little bit. See how this is pure black, right? And then this is really dark. So I think I'm going to make a light that's jutting kind of in this direction. Well, kind of this direction, I'm thinking, from the proximal to distal towards him, just so we can fill this in a little bit better, because it feels very in shadow and blue, and it will get rid of some of these like darker areas I'm not such a fan of. So let's hit space, and I'm just going to duplicate this guy, Control D, W, move this one. Okay, I thought I duplicated it. Control D, move this one over, and I'm going to have this light go this way because I want it to come into his face, is what I'm thinking. And I'm actually going to have it go a little bit up too, just because I don't know if there's lights that are filling underneath as well. And instead of blue, I'm going to do, let's say, I'm picturing it being kind of this color here. So let's do a little bit more of like an orangey yellow. And let's do less than this. Let's do 0.3. Just I feel like that might be a little bit too strong to do 0.4. Okay. So the main thing is, don't do all the same color for all your lights. I knew somebody, one of the things he would do when he would light stuff, he would do kind of similar to what I would do. He would do practical lights. But then he had like a script that he would run that would create a ball of light. And literally all it was a bunch of directional lights all over in all different directions that were all different colors. Because it's better to have it more full of all these different things. Don't leave them just white, and don't leave them all just one color. Unless you're going for like a specific look. But generally, you kind of want to have a breadth of lights with all these different colors, because that way they interact and they work with each other, and it's much more interesting. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and let's click on this one, and let's go ahead and render that, and I'm going to pause it. So I'm looking at this, and you know, I feel like that's filled it in quite a bit. Didn't really do much for this though, did it? I don't know why that's so dark. Well, whatever. But I could play around with more lights and put a lot of them. You know, honestly, depending on the project that I'm doing, I might have, I mean, I've had some scenes that have like 50 lights in them. You know what I mean? So it depends on what you're making. You could have a lot of lights. But obviously, the more lights you add, the more render time, things like that. It's not awful, but it will add to it. But I'm going to call that good as far as the lighting is concerned. I think that's good for our two shots. Next one I'm going to do is this. I'm just going to set it up for render. I'm not going to render in it just because that's time consuming and we'd just be sitting here. But I do want you to know how to do it. So I'm going to go back to my render settings. Okay. And we're good on all of our settings. So you're going to always notice that there's two tabs, or there's always this one tab called common. And then this has my software. But if I switch to Arnold or whatever, you'll see other tabs. And this tab, and if it was a different render and engine, those deal all with like the quality of the render and stuff. The common is like the files, like the kind of files and like the bare bones kind of things that they're going to need to make. Okay. So let's start from the top and work our way down. So we're going to obviously stay in Maya software. So it wants the file name prefix. What you do in Maya is it actually doesn't export out video. It will say that it can, but it doesn't work. I don't know how to, it's very glitchy. And you don't want to render out videos. You want to render out image sequences. So file name prefix. So when we say image sequences, that means it's going to be like, shot 01 underscore 1, shot 01 underscore 2, shot 01 underscore 3. It'll be these frames that it will create, okay, in a sequence. So we'll call this shot 01. Okay, so that's going to be the name. So basically all of the image sequence is going to have shot 01 in it. Now we need the image format. I like to use PNGs. PNGs probably what you want. Don't because they have alpha in them, meaning that it has transparency. So if you had something see-through, you could composite it. And then you see it says frame/animation extension. Right now it says name.extension, which means it's literally going to write shot 01 dot PNG. I want to make it, but that's single frame. I want to make it multiple frames. So we're going to do shot, we're going to be name underscore number dot extension. So now it's going to be the name. So shot underscore 01, 02, 03, 04. But we have frame padding. Frame padding is the number of zeros in front of it. Or it's not the number of zeros. It's the number of spaces. So see how it says 0001? That's 4. If I made 3, you're going to see, let me click off so you can see it, it'll do 003. Leave it on 4. It actually doesn't matter as much as you might think, but for some video editors, they have to be 4. I don't know why. And it doesn't hurt anything. So that's just frame padding. That's what that stands for. Start frame, end frame. So let's go down here actually before I get to the start frame, end frame. It's going to ask renderable camera. Switch that to shot 1, shot 01, and then 1 to 48. That's what I need to put in here. So 1 to 48 by frame 1. That means it's going to render every frame, but you can make it by frame 2, so it renders every other frame. And then since we run at 24 frames per second, when you go to bring it to footage, make it 12 frames per second, so it'll hold it basically for 2. But you could also, let's say you want to do a slow-mo shot, you could have it render like 0.1 frames, and it'll be like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. And then you could play the footage like at slow time, and that's why it's there. But you always leave it at 1. 720, that's all fine. That's good. Okay. So now what you would do from here, don't do this. You can do it if you want, but maybe you want to do it eventually for your own film, we would just close this out, and then we would go to rendering, and I would go render. Again, don't do this. I'm just showing you. Batch render. And then apparently it has to ask for access, and we'll allow access. And what you're going to see down here, it's just going to say result, rendering with Maya software. And then if I click on this, it's actually going to bring open this script editor. And I can see a little bit more of what it's doing, but you can also see it down here. So the first frame is going to take a little while. Now, while it's doing this, it'll also say where it's saving it to. So right now, it's saving it to Creech Film, because apparently that was the one I was working on. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to where this project is. Okay, so we're going to go to downloads. And then I like to do by date modified, so it's a little bit easier. Scroll down. Where are you? Puts folders on the bottom, which, okay, here we go. This isn't, all right, let's do it alphabetical. Well, so what you're going to see now, let me just show you this real quick. So you can see percentage of rendering done, blah, blah, blah. And it says the frame. So it's rendering frame 1. So it's on percentage 91, 92, 93. But it's shot 010001.png. Okay. I'm just trying to find the folder. This is why I got to make sure the project folder is set correctly. I'm going to pause it till I find it. It's rendering. You want to go to your project folder, and then you go to the images folder. So if you remember, source images are things that go into your scene. Things that come out of your scene, like rendered images, go to images. So if I open up images, I can actually see my footage right here. So I can actually see this picture of my rendering right there. Okay, and then you can see shot 2, and then it's working on shot 3, and you'll see them populate as they go until you get to 48. Okay, yeah, and you can see it here as well, right? Now this is a super long process. The other thing that happens too, just so you realize, is that it really hits your CPU. So you see, I'm running at 100%. Because basically what Maya is going to do is it's going to take everything that you have, whatever power you have in your computer, and it's going to use the full bore of it for as long as it needs to complete it. And so I've had renders go for days before. So that's one of the reasons why I'm not like a big fan of like working on laptops, because laptops are just going to get hot and they're going to start to throttle down. If you're on a desktop, that thing could run and just keep going, and it's fine. It's not gonna, I mean, it's got lots of fans and stuff running through it, but just be aware that it is running your computer at full bore. Okay. So what this is going to do is it's basically going to make our footage for us. Now, if for some reason I'm looking at this and I'm not happy with it, all I have to do is I might want to stop it, right? So to stop it, all you would do is you just go to render and you go cancel batch render. And that will actually stop the rendering. And then you can fix whatever fixes you want and then go ahead and batch render again. And that's a possibility. All right. So when this was done, it would render, right now it's going to render from 1 to 48. All I would do is I'd go back to my render settings. It'll say like, complete. I'd go up to my render settings. I would change this to shot 2. Okay. And then leave this. I'd leave this. And then I would say, oh, it's got to go from 50 to 105. I think that's what it was. 105. And then I want to make the camera my shot 2 camera. And this would all stay the same. And then I would just close that. And then I would just go to render, batch render again. And then it would start rendering from frame 50 to 105 using the shot 2 camera. Right now it's rendering from the shot 1 camera, right? It's rendering from here. Okay. Now, here's the thing. While this is rendering, don't work on your computer. Go do something else. Go play video games, whatever it is you got to do. Leave your computer alone. Just let it do its business. You just want it to render. Don't try to do other things because it could mess it up. Also, you're just adding more stress. It's just going to make the render take longer too. So don't even go on the internet with it. Don't do anything with it. Just leave it like it is. Okay. But obviously you're not rendering anyway. When you are done with this video that we're working on here, what I want you to do is just save this scene. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this, even though I'm working while it's rendering. I'll save it as the next version. Boop, 5. Save as. Okay. I will save this. And then what I want you to do is just take your project folder and, zip it and submit it like you have been. Okay. Don't worry about rendering. I know I'm rendering right now. I don't want you to render just because when you go to set it to me, it's going to be all those images files, and it just makes it much, much larger. It's going to be a really big file, and I just don't want all those things. I can tell that you did the lighting here. So if I open it up, I can click on it and see that you rendered it, or that it renders fine. The lighting is obviously the artistic part. It's not the other thing. Now, if you want to play around with the lighting and make it like, ooh, it's dramatic or something like that, I totally have a problem with that either. Yeah, and then that's it. Okay, so just get the lighting done and submit that, and then you are good for this week. So go team.